It's not in the face! Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Hey Not the Face with your host John Nash and your producer me, Steffi Haynes. And today we are going to look at all the business moves that are happening with Paramount Plus. We are going to look at some stuff with ESPN. We're going to talk a little bit about the gambling scandals. We're going to take a look at the TKO earnings call and some UFC antitrust case updates. But if you want access to all of that, you're going to need to come up with a little bit of money, some payola, because some of this will be behind a paywall. So, John, how the heck are you? I hear you're in a different place this week.
Yes, I am in Minnesota Saturday night during the Ortiz-Lubin fight. I missed that. I had to watch it on replay. I got on a plane when it was 82 degrees in Los Angeles and stepped off at midnight with wind chill. It was below 10 degrees and it was even frickin' snowing in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So that's where I'm at. Thankfully it's warmed up a little bit, hit 50 today. I still feel a little chilly though, but I am braving the cold of the Twin Cities for you, the listener. I could be sitting in front of a fire, could be wrapped in a blanket, but no, instead I'm sitting here in front of a laptop talking to you people.
How are you doing without your beloved cat?
Oh, good. She's moved on. She abandoned me. She's staying with my brother and she's having the time. She's already two-timing me already. So I'm a little stressed already to begin with because my significant other out here, I'd forgotten I'd promised to take her to the Stevie Nicks concert. And so I have just remembered, I was just reminded that today, and the concert is tomorrow. So right after this call, I got to scramble and see if there's tickets available. So I have my own issues besides the cat going on right now.
I also have big plans for tomorrow. There is in a neighboring town to us, it's a German town called New Braunfels. They have Wurst Fest that just started. So for the very first time ever, I'm going to go to Wurst Fest and I am going to eat German food. And I think my husband's going to participate in a Stein holding contest. And basically they give you this really heavy Stein and they fill it with beer, and you have to hold it out in front of you with your arm straight out, and your other arm has to be straight at your side, and you cannot bend your arm, and you cannot brace the stein with your thumb. Your thumb has to be folded in with the rest of your fingers, and you basically hold it out until you can't hold it anymore, and the last person that is left wins whatever the prize is. But they give you the stein to take home because you have to kick in $25 to participate, because everything out there, well, most everything out there is it all benefits nonprofits. So I'm going to eat German food, maybe have a beer, and I'm going to listen to world-class yodelers.
Oh, that sounds like a hell of a day. That's I got to be honest, the Stein holding contest sounds more like a form of torture.
I just want to watch everybody spill their beer.
That sounds like one of the tortures Dick Cheney would sign off on. So
it sounds a lot like basic training exercises too.
Oh, well, that too. But I'm envious of you because I
get to hear yodelers.
No, not that part. The brats stuff. So that sounds good. And I do not eat much of that anymore since I am, for the most part, a vegetarian. For the most part, not by choice.
I want potato cakes and German potato salad. The brats are okay. You know, I like brats and everything, but I'm really more interested in Jaeger schnitzel. I love that stuff. Yum, yum, yum.
I love meats that sound made up.
Jaeger schnitzel is a very thin pork tenderloin. They pound it out really, really thin, and then they bread it with breadcrumbs and pan fry it. And they put this gravy on it, but it has like a twang to it. It's really, really yummy. So I'm looking forward to some Jaeger schnitzel and like German potato salad.
I think I've eaten that at the Red Lion Inn in L.A. in the past. So
It's
now
delicious.
it makes me familiar.
Yes,
Well,
it's delicious.
you know what?
Yep.
Let's not even talk. Let's just talk some more German food instead of even discussing the fights and MMA and boxing.
Listen,
No one
I'm
wants to
more
listen to that stuff.
excited about the yodelers. I'm
Yeah.
super stoked. I've never seen anything like that before. I mean, I've seen it on video, but I've never seen anything like that in person. Like, I've only been to what do they call it? A Ren fair. I've been to a Ren fair one time, so I was expecting it to be kind of like a Ren fair. So I don't know. We'll find out tomorrow when we go.
Well, good luck with that.
And good luck with your Stevie Nicks ticket search. I hope you find the tickets.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I'm already planning my excuses.
You better get her something good for Christmas.
Oh yeah, everybody gets something good but me. So that's a given.
All right, so I guess we should get down to business here.
Oh, I thought the show was done. I was all excited there for a moment.
There were some updates in the UFC antitrust cases. What were they?
Well, there was some motion on that department. There were several filings. One was, I'll go through a bunch of them. There was a joint status report filing, which is filed by both parties, a joint status. So it's the plaintiffs and the defendants. There was a plaintiff statement of missing information relevant to the defendant's motion to compel arbitration. And then there was a motion to leave to seal. So let's go through those really quick. I'll go in orders. I have the documents in front of them. The first one was look at the joint status report regarding discovery deficiency. And the purpose of this is a joint update from the plaintiffs and defendants in all three of the current antitrust cases and potential class actions. That is Johnson v. Zuffa, Cirkunov v. Zuffa, and Davis v. Zuffa. And they describe the ongoing discovery disputes. And so the key points of that, the plaintiffs are arguing that the defendants are refusing to follow the court-ordered process for resolving discovery gaps and allege that the search terms used by Zuffa, TKO, are deficient. With, I think it's like 40% are yielding no results, with many missing key topics like contract negotiations, competitors, debt issuance, items like that. And they point out too that under the previous, these are things that would have been hit under on the Lee case. So that's why they're saying they can tell that they're not, that there's something going on. They're not finding this material. And the defendants, they claim, are withholding or incompletely producing fighter contract negotiation documents, granular compensation data, fight metric performance data, communication logs and text messages from key executives, especially Dana White, Hunter Campbell, Sean Selby, Maynard. So those are as you can imagine, those are some of the key communications you'd want to have. And they also talk about possible spoliation, which is the loss or deletion of material. In this, they're talking about lost text messages, missing cell phones and emails. And so they're asking the court to compel full responses, and then the completion of worksheet production of the central contract repositories, and they want to come up with new search terms and other items like that. What they're not asking for is any sanctions by the judge. So it's one of those things where they're asking the judge to get involved, but they are not supplying this material. And you would think they would want the judge, they would ask the judge to come down hard, but they are not doing that as of yet. The second file I'll go over, filing
why they might. Yeah. Could I ask why they might not be doing this request for sanctioning?
I am not quite certain. I mean, you look at the spoliation. I posted on Twitter a graph showing Tracy Long and Dana White. That how they are missing for years all their text messages, right? And that a large number of their documents are, Tracy Long and both Dana White are missing a large number of those text messages, which seems like they must have deleted them, which they shouldn't have done because they've been under court order since the filing of the Lee case back in December 16, 2014, to preserve the record, right? And so you would think that's something that, obviously that's a violation if they've lost this material that they were supposed to preserve. and key negotiation, text message documents and stuff. And yet you would think, I mean, if that was me, you'd think you'd want to come down hard on the defendants for not doing it. Now, it's possible that one is they don't feel the need to go nuclear yet because they want to let the defendants have a chance to respond by making it clear to the judge that they are not properly disclosing. And maybe they think that's going to be enough. It's also possible that they feel that the judge alone will take action. But I guess I am somewhat, as a layman on the outside, I am somewhat surprised they did not ask the judge to come down hard on the defendants when they're arguing that they're ignoring the court's orders. And I've noticed too, they seem to do this a lot. The plaintiffs, there's several times, as we've talked on the show, where someone is not complying, and yet the defendant's response is, hey, judge, they're not complying, but they do not ask for any specific or hard sanctions against them. I mean, they've brought up the possibility of sanctions before, but that's it. They don't really ask the judge to lay the hammer down on these guys. So I guess my final answer is I don't really know what they're doing.
I would totally be over there right in the judge's ear. Do something, do something.
Now it's possible they are just waiting to see the judge's reaction in person, what he's going to do. And maybe, now I am in Minnesota, but I believe the next hearing is in 2 weeks, or maybe even less than 2 weeks. About two, I think roughly a week and a half from now, end of next week, I believe, is the next status report hearing. I have to double check. I'm in Minnesota. I can't go. If I was in LA, I would definitely take time to go because I want to see the judge's reaction. But if you're someone in Vegas next week, towards the end of next week, and you have nothing better to do, or you're in the media listening to this, or you're someone in the fight business, please go to the Nevada courthouse and see what the judge's reaction is, because we cannot depend on Paul Gift being the only guy there every time. Maybe he has something to do. He might not show up. We need some witness there. So please, if you're in Vegas, someone in Vegas, I would love to know that someone is going to show up to see what the judge's reaction to this is going to be.
For sure. And you had another thing on your list there that you were going to talk about before I rudely interrupted you.
Oh, yes. There's two other. That's all right. I am so used to being interrupted all the time. I let it just flows off like water off my back. But the second, not by you, by everybody else in my life, I mean, specifically, Stephanie. But number 2 on it is our plaintiff's statement of missing information relevant to defendant's motion to compel arbitration. This was filed November 8th. So this was the first action document. I should have started with this one. And is a detail of what discovery plaintiffs still lack in order to oppose TKO's and Zuffa's motion to compel arbitration. And so this is a document they're looking for discovery for Johnson and Serkinov specifically, because this is the information they want to use to attack the arbitration agreements and class action waivers that are in the contracts. And in it, the court previously held that monopsonization evidence is relevant to whether UFC's arbitration clauses are enforceable, i.e. if they are procedurally unconscionable. So the plaintiffs contend that they have received only 213,000 documents. If you recall, in the Lee case, they received over 1 million documents. According to the plaintiffs, too, I believe the number is 60% are from one employee, this vast number of documents, and that's Tracy Long. And all she does is transmits contracts back and forth. So they're trying to claim, the defendants try to claim that she is part of the negotiation process, but when they looked at her transactions, her emails and stuff, because you got to remember, she deleted a bunch of her text messages have been deleted. We look at those emails, it's merely her sending a contract over that's already been negotiated by someone else. That's at least what they claim in the document. And so there are over 50, according to the filing, over 1,500 fighters' contracts contain the arbitration clauses. But UFC has only produced a few dozen of the negotiation documents, emails, text messages when they negotiated this. And so the defendants are looking for more documents because this is really important because they want to see, basically what they want is the negotiations, the communications between the fighter, the manager, and the UFC and how the fighter got these arbitration agreements and class action waivers in their contracts. And they want to demonstrate that the UFC, because they had monopsony power, market power, they basically could force these contracts on fighters. And the argument and this is going to be along the lines of, this is Fred Garvin, give him credit. He has made this case. I know a lot of attorneys are not 100% convinced it'll work, but he has made the argument that because the UFC has, if they can demonstrate they have monopsony power, they can then make the argument that these contracts should be void because they were not fairly negotiated. They were so one-sided, so procedurally unconscionable that those arbitration agreements and class action waivers should not apply. And who knows, if the judge does agree with that, this will surely go to the Supreme Court. Who knows how they'll rule? But that's important for Judge Boulware's decision. And lo and behold, all these negotiations seem to have magically disappeared. So that's pretty important. Again, I would love to be in Vegas in a week and a half when the judge hears that all that material is missing and has been turned over, and see what his reaction is. And then finally was a motion to leave to seal. I think that was the most recently filed. And this is just a procedural request that asks the court's permission to seal exhibits attached to the joint status. And then the plaintiffs, though, I should note, are not agreeing that the material is confidential, but are following the court's ruling. So that is the filings we've had. The last one, probably the least interesting, although it's, again, why we don't see a lot of the material, because they asked to seal a lot of the documents ahead of time, no matter apparently how unimportant they are. They're always asking to seal. But the other two are, I would argue, very important. And again, I am extremely intrigued to see what the judge's reaction will be come whenever. I should double check to see when the next status hearing is. I believe it's November 20th, but I could be wrong. So if you're in Vegas at a time, and you want to help out a bro, show up at the courthouse.
So we have basically an Agatha Christie mystery here with the case of the missing discovery.
Yeah, I mean, it's the interesting thing is, I shouldn't say interesting, but kind of funny, is that if you look at what is missing, it's not like a few text messages. It is years and years of text messages from basically the end of the Lee case, July 2017 until 2020 or 2021. All of Dana White's and Long's text messages are missing. So 4 years. And then another few years after that, again, all their text messages are missing. Now, I've seen people theorize on Twitter, like, oh, are they talking about gambling on those text messages? I really doubt that's the case.
They're talking about the contracts.
Exactly.
Jesus.
So
it's abundantly clear if it's between Long and Dana White, it's about the goddamn contracts.
Well, here's the interesting timeline. Yes. Listen, you got people on Twitter you got to deal with. You got to walk them through this stuff sometimes. But Dana White's, again, the messages missing start immediately after Lee, and then up until 2020, mid 2020. Then we get some apparently 7 text messages produced, and from him, and 2 text messages for Tracy Long, and then starting in 5/20/2022, which is right around the time that the promotional agreements that include the arbitration and class action waivers introduced, around that time until November 2024, there's no more text messages again. So we are talking about massive amounts of communications just missing with Dana White and Tracy Long. And, who knows what they're talking about. I mean, maybe it's where mine can wander some personal stuff, but I got a feeling you're right. It is about it. And it might not just be the contracts. It might be the contracts, but it also might be whatever. I am sure that it is involved this case, though. Whatever communications are not there, my guess is they involve this case. Now, interesting note on this, we've seen Dominance argue that we shouldn't have to produce discovery because we have a client responsibility and all that. Well, I'm sure the plaintiffs can argue that those managers, agent communications with Dana White and others are even more important now, because if the UFC has been deleting messages. We want to see what the other party was talking. We can get those messages from the other party. So you cannot use the defense that Ali Abdelaziz tried using that, that material can be attained from the UFC. Well, it might not be able to be attained from the UFC because the UFC is deleting material. So we're going to still need your messages. And that's some way they might be able to recover some of those messages if they're to outside parties outside of the company, which would be what you'd expect if it's negotiations.
That's pretty bold of them to be deleting messages like that in light of the fact they were ordered not to. Do they just not fear any repercussions?
Well, I mean, there's a couple thoughts. That one is, do they possibly do not fear any repercussions? The other possibility, in good faith, you got to say it's also possible they just accidentally deleted all this material for whatever reason. Yeah, well, yeah,
especially in different periods. Like you gave us a stretch of time from right after the Lee case up until 2020, and then you gave us another time period from 2022 to 2024. There were different time periods. I don't believe that they mass deleted that many messages. That's that's tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of messages.
Yeah, in fact, let me tell you the number of messages that supposedly got deleted, if I have it here in front of me as we look through it. But listen, your suspicion, I think, is well warranted. I'm not going to deny that it doesn't make sense. But Dana White has only produced 48 text messages and 36 emails during the entire time.
And he is on record as talking about having multiple phones because he has such a busy phone.
Yeah, well, apparently he keeps losing those phones and deleting all the messages on them. So yours, again, I think your suspicion is warranted, but I had to put that out to be in all fairness. Now, the other possibility is one, like we said, maybe they're just not concerned. They think they're all powerful and they don't have to worry about it. I guess the other possibility is they realize that some of those messages could be really damning. And Dana White maybe did not listen to what the attorneys probably explained to him about communications going forward and communicated messages that perhaps they do not want shared, which would also not be surprising to me. But what's bad about that potentially, if they find that the UFC, Dana White, TKO, that they believe that they intentionally deleted this material, or even unintentionally, but did it in a way that, you were supposed to preserve this material and you didn't. Well, then the judge, if it goes to jury, if it gets to trial eventually, the judge could basically tell the jury that because this material was not available to the plaintiffs, we want you to take an adverse inference on all the material you see. Because, in other words, they're telling them, just assume that the material that's not there meets the narration, the story that the plaintiffs are telling. Mm-hmm. So that could be very bad, too, for the defendants, because you don't want the judge to say that. The other possibility, too, is the judge's own rulings, because he has several rulings to make. He might rule based on the same adverse inference and say, I have to side with the plaintiffs about this these class action waivers and arbitration agreements because you've given me no choice, because I have no material here to work with because it's all been deleted. So that's another possibility. So
I like that one. I like that one best.
Yeah, it could come back to hurt the defendants, but you have to kind of assume that there must be some somewhat damning material in there that would lead them to delete it. Again, another possibility is it's also very possible, who knows, that Dana White and Tracy Long came up with the idea of just deleting messages all the time. And it was not someone from the company that did that. I mean, you never know for sure, but that still that wouldn't change, I don't think, the judge's view.
Yeah, because they were ordered not to do that. I mean, even
exactly.
if they, and I'm using the heaviest, most sarcastic air quotes, even if they lost them, the judge should come down like a ton of bricks for them being careless when they were ordered to preserve. When you're ordered to preserve something, you're supposed to do everything in your power to do that. You don't lose everything multiple times. I mean, over the course, Dana talks about how he gets new phones all the time. He's supposed to preserve those other phones. At the bare minimum, the messaging on them. I've lost phones before and was able to retain messages because they go in a cloud. I mean, I just don't buy any excuse that defendants are giving, if they have any.
Yeah, well, again, it'll be very interesting to see what Judge Boulware's reaction to this, because these filings are new. We haven't seen his reaction. It'll be interesting to see how he reacts at the next status hearing, which I will not be there, but hopefully someone will be there to witness it.
Well, all right. So that's going to wrap up the antitrust stuff. Let's move on to last week's TKO earnings call. What was the most standout thing from that call in your eyes?
Well, in my eyes, from the earnings call, I would say the discussion about fighter pay that came up, that when they asked Mark Shapiro, I believe, was on the call, and then Lawrence Epstein came in to answer the fighter pay question. And the question was also about the meaningful inception to margins, and a meaningful increase, I should say. And so Shapiro talked about how they plan on as the revenue increases, the margins will increase. Currently, in the first half of the year, I think it was 59%. The last quarter, it had dropped to 51% for various reasons, but they expect it to be, close to 59, 60% for the year. And then going in next year in the future, as more revenue comes in with these new deals, they expect those margins being the technically not profit margins, but earnings, after their expenses, the money left over, they expect that to increase above 60%. So that was interesting. So that's their how much the UFC's making. So they're making tons of money, as they make clear all the time. As Mark Shapiro said in the interview, they were what is it, gushing cash or something. It was his comment. No lie detected there. So then they brought in Lawrence Epstein to talk about the fighter pay. And he talked about how they are changing the premium athlete contracts because there's no longer pay-per-view. So they're doing that, not having a problem with that. And should note too, remember, was it Rob Macy came out and volunteered that because of the changes in contracts, I will freely look at your contract and we can challenge it because this is a meaningful change to your contract, one-sided change by the UFC. They don't have the right to do that. I have not heard of a single fighter, either publicly or through the grapevine, has taken him up or any other attorney up on that offer. So it sounds like all the stars are accepting the new contract changes. Epstein noted that everybody's going to see an increase in fighter pay, which generally when they talk about that, they talk about the wage level, not the wage share, which is not shocking. Fighter pay will probably go up next year. Let's say it's at a total 175 million. Next year, it might be 185, 190 million. So the wage level will go up. But as Epstein notes, it'll be in line with the margins they've maintained. And so I think that makes it clear they do not expect the percentage of revenue going to the fighters to go up. In fact, I would not be shocked if the percentage going to the fighters kind of dips downwards because they can give them, let's say they're at, I think the last estimate where since the Lee case is 16.8%, 16.9%, they could probably drop that to 15%. If you have a lot of more money coming in, that means fighters are still getting paid more, but it's less that the UFC has to pay them as a percentage. And that also explains in part, why their margins are going up. So their other costs are fixed. Fighter pay it seems to be basically fixed now. It's not variable based on the pay-per-view numbers. And you add those two things together and your margins, your profit margins, your EBITDA margins can keep going up. And so it is good to be in ownership. It's good to be the owners of capital right now, especially of capital that has market power, because you can be rolling in it.
What's the biggest takeaway from this call, maybe outside the fighter pay or maybe from the fighter pay? What's the takeaway from the call?
Well, I mean, the takeaway is it's more the same for the UFC. They are doing good. TKO is doing good. Everything about the company is doing good. Their revenues, if we look at their, not just this earnings call, but we look at their 8K filing and 10K filings, revenue for last quarter was down, but that's because they did one less event. And last year they had the highest grossing event they've ever done in the Sphere. I knew it was a big event. I missed that before, but I guess it's the highest grossing event of all time on revenue, which means it made more money in revenue than any other UFC event in history. And that includes Conor McGregor versus Khabib that sold over 2 million pay-per-views. So that's pretty impressive. That suggests that the Saudi sponsorship was sizable. In addition to the gate because they've done big gates before, and this gate was maybe the biggest ever, but only several million above Conor's biggest gate. That would suggest that fee that they got from the Saudis was very, very large to make this the highest grossing event of all time. So all that was interesting about, but it's kind of more of the same. It's nothing surprising. What was interesting to me mostly was hearing more of the boxing, because that's a new venture by TKO. That is something new they're doing. And it was probably the thing I was the most interested in. And so we got some additional information about that. So according to their 10K filing, and this is the quote from the 10K filing, the company in March of 2025, the company entered into a joint venture with Sela Company. Is it Sela or Sela for the Saudis?
I've heard it's Sela.
Okay, I've heard it Sela once, I think, and now it's stuck in my head. But Sela Company to launch a global boxing promotion business. Sela Company holds a majority of the common equity units, while TKO was granted in substance common stock in the form of profit interest, subject to vesting upon the achievement of certain future milestones. TKO will also provide executive and operational services to the joint venture under a service agreement with an annual fee over an initial 5-year term. During the 3 months ended September 30, 2025, 25% of the total grant date fair value of the profit interest vested due to achievement of the specified milestones. So in English, so let me translate that, because I'm sure everybody's listening going, I have no idea what that means. But that's the interesting part, is what that says. So let me translate it. What it says is that they have a company, the Zuffa Boxing, and Sela owns most of the company, meaning they control it right now. TKO stake, though, they have, instead of regular ownership shares, TKO gets something called profit interest, basically the right to earn a share of future profits if the new boxing company has hit certain performance goals, like revenue targets, I'm guessing, certain event milestones, things like that. They don't specify what the goals are, the performances that they have to hit, but those are my guess. So these profit interests only vest, i.e. become TKO's property, if those goals are achieved. So far, they've gotten 25%, and that was before or maybe immediately after the Crawford versus Canelo fight. Now, we know from Thomas Hauser that supposedly the percentage that TKO will have in this company is 40%. So they're close to already having the 40% based on their performances. The other thing that's interesting is for the next 5 years, they will be paid an annual fee, which we know is $10 million a year. And this demonstrates a lot of things. One is it shows that TKO, while vesting interest in getting more and more larger share of this company, will still be getting profits directly from Sela, because they're going to be paid a management fee. And so they don't have to worry about losing money, because everything's being covered by Sela, plus they'll get this management fee. So it's guaranteed money. And on top of that, they have a contract to work with them on these Riyadh season events, these big events, of which they get a percentage of the negotiations they do for the broadcast fees, the site fees, all those things. And they estimate they'll get about $10 million per event as well. And so it's going to be an incredibly lucrative event deal for them. And I'm thinking about Kurt Emhoff. If you guys get a chance, listen to Kurt Emhoff's Boxing Esquire podcast with Larry Goldberg, a promoter, Boxing Insider website, but now he's a promoter as well. And he kind of nails the threat that the UFC, or I should say TKO and Zuffa Boxing poses, because you see this investment for the Saudis, but you also see very experienced business people making a plan to move into boxing without risking themselves, but building something from which they can build up more and more, and potentially push out the incumbents right now. And so I find that it's fascinating, but also somewhat alarming. I mean, if the UFC, TKO, Dana White, and them were getting into boxing specifically just to put on some events, I think I'd be kind of welcome. It'd be great just to have a Paramount show. But I think the goal becomes apparent when you look at the percent they're going to give this company and how much boxing can make and how much they can make up, the rights and everything, that they're going to make a major push to dominate the industry. Although they did note, they made clear in the call as well that Dana White will not be exclusively focusing on boxing. I think they want to calm everybody's nerves that Dana's going to be only on boxing because, as Ronda Rousey said, the UFC cannot survive without him. So they wanted to make sure everybody knew that he would be back running the ship at the UFC and would only occasionally dip into the boxing promotion.
Let's talk about Dana White specifically, because we have all these gambling scandals. And so I want to switch things up for just a moment since we're already talking about Dana. What do you think about Netflix doing a series on Dana White's gambling in this current climate where there's just scandals in all the sports?
Well, it's very bad timing. It reminds me in some ways how poorly timed Dana White's slap fight, or power slap, I should say, rollout was, and he's caught on video slapping his wife. In many ways, it's the same thing. You have a scandal spring up, and then they show, we're going to make a series about Dana White, the degenerate gambler. Now, there's no evidence. I've never seen anything of him betting on fights. I don't think he bets on fights at all. So that's the good news there. There's nothing that suggests that should suggest that he's involved in fixing the fights or improperly betting on the fight business. But it does look bad that you have a guy that looks like he has a serious gambling problem. I mean, there's no other way to put it. He looks like he has a serious gambling problem. And that video rolls out at the time that the major league sports are having a gambling crisis, and as well as the UFC is now experiencing their own gambling scandal. Maybe bigger in some ways than that of the other major leagues, but thankfully for them, not getting nearly as much attention as those guys get, and being the Major League Baseball and NBA. That's
my next question is, what do you think of the actual news coverage across the three sports that are really heavily being talked about right now? And that's the NBA, Major League Baseball, and UFC. Because you and I talked about this before, and you noted something.
Well, being back at home with my mom here taking care of her, one thing she does is she leaves the TV running all the time on the news networks. And so I've noticed that there's been several pieces put together on all the different cable news, local news, or national news about the betting scandals. And on all of them, they talk extensively about what a big deal it is, the individual players that are involved, the sports, the NBA, Major League Baseball. But I have not seen one yet bring up combat sports, the UFC, or anything else. They are getting a pass on this. They're just not. I think it kind of confirms we are a niche sport. It is not something that enters mainstream, or maybe they just also view it hardly as a sport in some ways, especially older people watching cable news. As my dad said, he still was, I think, to his dying day, convinced it was just pro wrestling. He did not believe it was real. So I think that's part of the UFC in some ways lucky because it's not as big in the public sphere, is not as big in the public consciousness, that it's not being grouped in with the major league sports that are having the scandal. But it's very easy to spot that the other sports are getting big time coverage on ESPN, on CBS, on ABC, on CNN, MSNBC. And their only mention of the UFC scandal is, I guess, Yahoo on their front page had a link to a story by Ben Folks about it, that there might be a small mention on ESPN, but that's the only mainstreamish coverage I've seen of it so far.
What do you think about ESPN and Penn Entertainment ending their sports betting partnership like several years early, and that's a $2 billion deal? Do you think it's like strictly a business decision, or is there possibly a little bit of a taint, a stench maybe of these gambling scandals involved in this?
Well, I mean, the gambling scandal might have a small part in that it sped up the time frame or led them to pull the plug. But if you read Joe Pompliano he kind of pegged this as he was very, very down on this venture to begin with, because he just thought the other players are too ensconced and it's going to be too hard to make it, to compete with them, being, I think, with FanDuel and the other major betting sites that are already existing. So I think that's the big part. The big part, it was a bad business venture. Now, the timing that it happened right after these scandals would lead me to believe that the likely reason they did it is because it's been a bad business venture. But I think the timing right now, instead of, let's say, at the end of the year, next year, whatever, is because these scandals are unfolding. They're like, well, we might as well get out now before, it gets worse.
Now we're talking about ESPN. It's been announced recently that Paramount poached some executives from ESPN. And I want to give a shout out to Blake Avignon, because he broke this before anybody else did. It came out across more major news sources this week, but he was reporting on it 2 weeks ago. So I just figure that I would tip the hat to him, because he was the first one and he had the names, everything down to a science. So anyways, there were some poaching going on with Paramount and installing some executives into their CBS network. What exactly do we know? Who are they? What are their exact roles? What are they going to be doing, etc.?
Well, Matt Kenny, his role at ESPN was vice president of programming and acquisitions, and his new role at CBS is going to be vice president of programming. So no acquisitions there. I guess that's someone else handles that.
When they're the vice president of programming, what does that mean exactly? Because you're in the business.
Well, it's a little bit different business, I'm sure, his than what I am. But vice president, there's just a ton of vice presidents at various companies, entertainment companies. But usually it's the executive. He's below the CEO, CFO, but he's the person in charge of that department. And so he gets the status of vice president.
No, I don't mean the vice president part. I mean the programming part. What is
the program? Yeah.
Yes.
Well, he's in charge of the content that it's going to be on the channel. If it's, okay. I don't know if CBS is going to do a little differently, but usually these networks, programming is your content. So he's in charge of what shows they get, what programming they air.
Okay.
I believe I don't believe it's, he's not at CBS. I believe he's at CBS Sports. So he'd be in charge of the sports programming. And then Glenn Jacobs was in charge of, he was the vice president of MMA production at ESPN. And now he moves into a position, I believe he's the vice president of production. So he should be in charge of all the different sports production. Is he going to be in charge of NFL? I don't think so, because they already have people in place. I don't think they would mess with that, but maybe all the other sports they acquire, he'll be in charge of the production. So, but it's interesting because a couple things it tells us. One is people are maybe hoping for a different look for the UFC on Paramount. It sounds like if you're bringing.
To access the bonus content of this episode, you must be a paid subscriber. To do that, go to heynottheface.substack.com and subscribe today.
Ow! Ow! Not the face! Ooh! Okay, the face!